The rain in Manila has no rhythm, no mercy. It comes down like an old grudge washing over streets already bruised by years of wear and forgetting. The sky is heavy, not with thunder, but with the kind of silence that follows a story no one wants to tell anymore. People move faster under the grayness, heads bowed, umbrellas clashing like shields in an invisible war. It's just another Tuesday, and no one expects the extraordinary. Manny Pacquiao walks with his hands in the pockets of a faded jacket, hood pulled low over his eyes. There's no entourage, no camera crew, no curated public image trailing behind him. He's a legend, yes, but right now he just wants to feel the city without being seen by it. A habit he's kept since retirement, walking the streets in silence, listening more than speaking. He says it helps him remember who he was before the world crowned him. It's on one of these anonymous walks, turning the corner past a small bakery he used to visit as a boy, that he sees him. An old man, maybe 75 or 80, hunched, beneath the soft assault of the rain. He's holding a flimsy plastic tray, barely protected by a torn plastic bag tied over his shoulders like a cape of poverty. The tray is lined with candies, pastillas, yema, cheap chocolates, already damp at the edges. He doesn't shout, doesn't beg, just stands there, the rain decorating his dignity with every drop. Pacquiao stops without thinking. Something about the scene clutches at him. The way the old man holds the tray with shaking hands, the way his eyes scan passers-by, not with desperation, but with quiet hope. A flicker of something long buried stirs in Manny's chest, a memory with cracked edges. He watches for a few moments. People walk past the old man like he's invisible. A car splashes water onto the curb, barely missing his feet. He doesn't flinch. He simply adjusts his tray, as if that act alone might fix something larger. Manny steps closer. "Good afternoon, sir," he says softly, in Tagalog. "Kumusta po kayo?" The old man turns his head slowly, surprised someone has spoken to him. His face is a storybook, deep lines, sun-worn skin, eyes that carry the weight of entire decades. Yet, when he smiles, it's sincere. "Ah, still here, anak," he says, using the word for my child. "That must count for something." Pacquiao chuckles, brushing rain from his own face. "It does. May I ask, how long have you been out here?" "Since morning," the man replies. "It's slower when it rains. People rush. No time to... Stop, no time to see." Manny nods, the words land hard. He glances at the candies, now slightly melted under their improvised covering. "Do you sell a lot?" The man laughs, coughing into his elbow. "Enough to eat, enough to come back tomorrow." There's a pause. The rain hasn't let up, and Manny realizes he's getting soaked, but somehow it doesn't matter. He gestures toward the narrow curb. And the two sit, the prizefighter and the Candyman, just a pair of silhouettes under a weeping sky. "Do you mind if I ask your name?" Manny says. "Ernesto," the man answers, "but most people just call me Tate. I guess it's easier." Manny looks down at the cracked sidewalk, then up at the face of a man who has seen more storms than him. He remembers himself at 10 years old selling donuts on corners just like this, back when shoes were optional and lunch was a maybe, back when dreams felt too expensive to afford. "I used to sell things too," he says quietly. "Cigarettes, bread rolls, whatever we had." Ernesto smiles again. "Then you understand." And he does. He understands everything in that moment. The ache in the legs, the fake smiles, the counting of coins with trembling fingers, the endless choosing between medicine and food, shelter and pride. He remembers his mother telling him to never steal, never beg. We fight with our hands, not with our knees. The rain intensifies, turning into needles of glass. Still, neither man moves. Cars honk in the distance. Somewhere, a jeepney backfires. But here, on this forgotten corner of a city that never stops surviving, time stretches. "Do you have a home?" Manny asks gently. Ernesto points toward the edge of the next block where an alley sinks into darkness. "Cardboard and tarp. Not much, but it's dry when I curl up tight enough." Manny feels the familiar sting behind his eyes. He turns away, pretending to watch a puddle ripple. What does one say in response to that? No platitude is big enough. No motivational quote feels worthy. So he stays quiet. Instead, he stands, reaches into his pocket, pulls out a few bills. Ernesto sees and shakes his head. "I'm sorry," he says. "I don't take money unless you take the candy. Fair is fair." Manny smiles, and not the public smile, the billboard grin, a different one, smaller, worn in. "All right then, one of each." He buys the candies, all of them, tucking them gently into his coat. As he does, he sees Ernesto watching him, not with suspicion, but with quiet gratitude. Not for the money, for the respect. "Do you eat lunch?" Manny asks. "Sometimes," Ernesto shrugs. "When I sell enough." "Come with me." The old man hesitates. "Where?" "Just nearby," Manny assures. "A good place, good rice." They walk in silence, through narrow streets where puddles blur the reflections of neon signs and motorbikes speed past like thoughts too quick to grasp. They arrive at a tiny eatery, a carinderia with 6 plastic chairs and the smell of garlic and broth heavy in the air. Inside, Manny orders 2 plates of adobo and fried eggplant, 2 cups of hot salabat. They eat in silence at first. Then, they talk. Not about boxing, not about fame, just about life. Mang Ernesto shares stories of his youth, of fishing in Mindoro, of a wife who sang lullabies even after their kids had grown, of a time when people looked you in the eye more often. Manny listens, not because he feels sorry, but because every word matters. The man across from him is more than a vendor. He's a map of the country, a mirror of everything forgotten. By the time they finish, the rain has lightened. Ernesto wipes his mouth with a napkin and leans back. "You're a kind man," he says. "There's not many left." "I just listened," Manny replies. "That's free." They step outside. The clouds begin to break slightly, like old skin peeling towards sunlight. Manny turns to him one last time. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Ernesto nods. "Same spot, rain or shine." "Okay," Manny says, "I'll see you then." But in his mind, something is already shifting. The wheels are turning. The heart is pulling. Because sometimes the smallest encounters are just the beginning of the biggest changes. And that night, as Manny Pacquiao sits alone in his home, candies still in his pocket, the rain returns once more. Not as a burden, but as a rhythm, a reminder. Not all fights happen in the ring. Manny didn't sleep well that night. Not because of the rain. He had long made peace with the lullaby of water against windows, but because of the silence that lingered between the drops. The kind that crawls in after you meet someone who didn't ask for help, but who somehow now lives in your thoughts, like an unanswered prayer. He sat for hours in the living room, lights off save for the low blue glow of the city outside, thinking about the man with the candy tray and the spine too tired to straighten. There was a feeling he couldn't quite name, but it pulsed just under his skin. It wasn't pity. Pity was too easy, too distant. This was something else, something closer, like recognition, like looking into a mirror that showed you a life you just narrowly escaped. The candies he'd bought were still on the table, half melted, some stuck to the wrapper, but he didn't throw them away. He just looked at them, each one a symbol, a chapter, a life wrapped in sweetness trying to cover bitterness. And he remembered, not for the first time, how close he had come to being forgotten. He thought of his mother, Dionysia, of the days when all they had was rice soaked in water and the hope that somehow tomorrow would bring change. He thought of the first time he fought for money, a bare-knuckle match behind a warehouse, no gloves, no judges, just fists and survival. He thought of sleeping on cold cement floors, of sweating through hunger, of winning not because he was stronger, but because he refused to stop getting up. And now, decades later, fame had given him power. But that power meant nothing if it didn't answer when called, and the image of Ernesto, Mang Ernesto with the rain in his hair and the world on his back, was calling, loudly. The next morning, Manny was up before the sun. He dressed without fanfare, no cameras, no interviews, just purpose. He drove himself, something he hadn't done in years, past the noise of waking traffic and the slow bloom of day. The corner was still wet from the night before, puddles like leftover sorrow, and yet there he was, same spot, same tray, same quiet dignity. Mang Ernesto Manny parked nearby and walked over, unnoticed at first. The old man was arranging his candies again, gently wiping away condensation, like a jeweler caring for cracked gems. "You came back," Mang Ernesto said, smiling as if he'd just been reunited with an old friend. "I said I would. You didn't have to. Most people say things and then disappear. I'm not most people." There was a short silence, but it wasn't awkward, just full. "I've been thinking," Manny said, "about your story, about your life." "Huh?" the old man sighed. "Not much of a story, just years and sugar and rain." "No," Manny said, "it's exactly the kind of story that matters." They sat again, just as they had the day before. Two figures in the current of the city, unnoticed, anchored in something deeper. "I want to ask you something," Manny continued, careful with his words. "What do you want, really?" Mang Ernesto blinked slowly, as if no one had asked him that in decades. He thought for a long time, then answered, "I want to feel useful. I want to earn, not beg. I want to live the days I have left with a little dignity. And maybe," he paused, "maybe not be so alone." Manny nodded, his jaw tight. "And if that were possible, would you accept help? Not a handout, a hand up." The old man studied him. Not the way people study celebrities, but the way someone studies the soul behind a question. And then gently he said, "If it still lets me stand on my own feet, then yes." That was all Manny needed. The rest of the day blurred into action. Calls were made, favors pulled, old friends contacted. He didn't announce it. He didn't film it for social media. He just moved like a boxer dancing between punches, efficient, quiet, determined. He reached out to a local organization he had quietly funded years ago, one that helped small vendors register as legal micro-entrepreneurs. Within hours, Mang Ernesto had a tax ID, a permit, and an official name for his stall. Sweet Tatai Candies. Manny had the idea for a small mobile cart. Not just a table, but something with wheels, a roof, and a printed tarp that protected not only Ernesto's product, but his pride. He had it built that same week. Wooden, sturdy, painted in the colors of the flag. At the top, in neat, bold letters, "Smile, you're still here." He stocked it with fresh inventory, but not without Ernesto's input. They chose together: coconut pastillas, sampalok banana chips, small packs of locally made chocolates, and each one bore a small sticker. "Thank you for supporting a life, not just a business." But Manny didn't stop there. He remembered how Ernesto had spoken of loneliness, of stories fading into nothing. So he called a friend who ran an after-school program nearby. Kids who had never known their own grandparents, who craved stories that weren't in textbooks. Every Friday, Mang Ernesto would come by the center and speak, not preach, just talk about the old days, about what a peso used to buy, about his wife's singing voice. The children listened like he was a treasure map, their eyes wide, their laughter sudden and bright. Word began to spread, not about Pacquiao, but about Tatai with the candy stories. People started lining up not just to buy, but to talk. They stayed, asked questions, told their own stories. A small community formed around that cart, around that man, and Ernesto changed. Slowly, the curve in his back lessened. The shake in his hands steadied. He started wearing a clean button-up shirt, tucked neatly into worn but polished pants. He smiled more, laughed, even added a radio to his cart so music would play, usually old ballads, the kind that danced gently in the background like memories, on tiptoe. One afternoon after packing up, he turned to Manny and said, "I haven't felt this alive in years. I didn't know you could be seen again after being invisible for so long." Manny didn't say anything. He just clasped the man's shoulder and nodded. That night, he returned home once again to the silence. But it was different now. It didn't sting. It settled around him like peace. Not all victories come with belts. Some come quietly with the simple sound of a man rediscovering his voice. And Manny Pacquiao, once the fiercest warrior in the ring, had found a new kind of fight. One where the opponent was indifference and the victory was a life reborn under the soft weight of rain. 3 months passed, and if you walked past the corner of Burgos Street around lunchtime, you'd notice something curious. A neat little candy cart, painted in bold colors with a white canopy, a hand-carved sign that read, "Smile, you're still here," and behind it, a man who had once blended into the background, now standing like a landmark of resilience. People stopped now, not just to buy sweets, but to greet Mang Ernesto by name. The ones who returned often would ask about his stories, the ones about his childhood in the province, his late wife's quiet wisdom, his first bicycle, his belief that kindness spreads like sugar in tea. Children would tug on their parents, arms pointing to him, begging for another story about the dog that learned to dance, or the neighbor who built a boat out of water jugs. It wasn't the candy that kept them coming. It was the warmth. Manny Pacquiao never made a show of his involvement. He never stood beside the cart for photos, never posted about it, never announced it at a press conference. For him, the act was complete in the result. The truth of it lived in Ernesto's new shoes, in the wooden cash box that now carried enough to eat and save and dream again. It lived in the way Ernesto had started shaving every morning, combing his thin hair carefully, carrying a folded handkerchief in his shirt pocket, like he had somewhere important to be. But this transformation wasn't just surface. It worked deeper, into something spiritual. Because when life has pushed you against the ropes for long enough, even standing becomes an act of rebellion. And Mang Ernesto had learned to stand again, not just upright, but open. He started arriving early, setting up the cart before the sun hit the pavement. He'd play old Kundiman songs on a small Bluetooth speaker someone had donated, the nostalgic melodies drifting through the humid air. People came for the music, stayed for the man, and each time someone walked away with a piece of candy, they also took with them a piece of something far less common, perspective. By month 4, the cart had a regular flow of customers. A nearby cafe began sourcing his banana chips as a signature topping. A school teacher invited him to speak at a storytelling event. A local newspaper printed a short feature about him titled "The Sweet Life of Tate Ernesto." The writer, a young man with tired eyes, cried during the interview. Ernesto gave him a caramel and told him, "Nothing stays bitter forever, not even coffee." But even amidst the bloom of good fortune, Manny kept coming back. Not every day, he didn't want to turn the story into a spectacle, but often enough to listen, to remind himself why the fight had always mattered. One afternoon, he arrived, just in time to see Mang Ernesto teaching a young boy how to fold a paper bird. The boy, maybe 7 or 8, had been crying moments before over something small and unfair. Ernesto leaned down, speaking softly, folding each crease with care. "Sometimes, anak," he said, "things fly best when they're made from what others throw away." Manny stayed back, smiling faintly, watching from a distance. That was the legacy right there. Not belts, not records, but that small moment between a man who had lost much and a child still learning what it means to be whole. Later, when they sat together over fishballs and sagot gulaman at the end of the day, Ernesto turned to him and said something Manny wouldn't forget. "You know, champ, I thought I was just meant to disappear, like some stories do, but you made me feel like a chapter worth rereading." Manny didn't reply. He couldn't. His throat was tight with something that didn't need to be spoken. He just nodded, and they ate in silence. The weeks passed gently, like waves smoothing over a once-broken shore. And then one day, Ernesto wasn't at the cart. The neighbors noticed first. A young couple who always bought yema for their daughter. A construction worker who came for coffee candy and a pep talk. They waited. They called out. Nothing. Manny heard the news later that morning. He went straight to the small boarding house, where Ernesto had been staying, a modest room donated by a local donor who had heard his story. The landlord, a kind widow named Arling Rosa, met him at the door, eyes red. "He passed in his sleep," she whispered. "Peaceful, like he just drifted." Manny sat alone in the room for a while. The air still held the scent of lemon balm. On the small desk beside the bed was a folded piece of paper. His name was written on the outside. Inside, in shaking letters, Ernesto had written, "Dear Manny, thank you for reminding me I was still alive, for helping me stand when I had forgotten how. This cart gave me more than money. It gave me days filled with laughter, names, purpose. You didn't rescue me. You walked with me. That's all I ever needed." Keep walking with others. If you can. Some of us just need a little light. Ernesto. The funeral was small but dignified. Manny covered the expenses quietly. He made sure the coffin was solid, the suit clean, the flowers white. He didn't speak publicly, but he stood at the front, hands folded, the letter in his pocket. In the weeks that followed, Manny kept returning to the corner, at first just to sit, then eventually to build something new. He turned the cart into a community project. He named it Tatai's Corner. Local vendors took turns running it, with proceeds going to a rotating fund for elderly street workers who had fallen through society's cracks. Stories were shared, candies sold. And on one side of the cart, now encased in glass, sat Mang Ernesto's original candy tray, cracked, water-warped, still holding one last pastilla. Above it, a plaque. This candy changed a life. So can you. It never made headlines. It never went viral, but every now and then someone would come to the cart, buy a candy, and sit for a while. They'd ask about the man who used to stand there, rain or shine, and the person behind the cart would smile and begin, well, his name was Ernesto, and once a world champion stopped to listen. That was the real legacy. Manny Pacquiao, the boxer, had fought some of the greatest warriors in the ring, but Manny Pacquiao, the man, had won something far more rare. The quiet, powerful victory of helping another human being feel seen, heard, and valued before their final bell rang. And in that corner of Manila, under a canopy of soft sun and distant rain clouds, the echo of one simple truth remained. Not all champions wear gloves, and not all fights are won with fists. Some are won with presence, some are won with love, some are one candy at a time.